Well, I've told you from way back that I've always done primary care in poorer communities.
Right.
And once you take care of people in Miami, you cannot miss the impact of heat. Between the people who work outdoors, from my folks who were getting sick because it was so hot in their homes and they couldn't afford their light bills, all these little things that people take for granted is
Mm-hmm.
already happening to the poor people that I care for. And I talk about it more if you have more time at a TED Talk, and we can talk about that, where you hear my patient stories. And when you day to day talk with people who are selling fruits, and you guys, if you're walking in Miami or any intersection, you see fruit vendors, people are selling flowers. These folks are out day and night in the heat, and it doesn't get cool at night, so it's always hot. And their kidneys, you see some changes in their blood from the kidneys. They're getting dehydrated. And for the folks who are on fixed income, not being able to pay for your AC, so they can't even run it, which then causes their mood, causes sleep disorders, causes their lung problems to worsen. This is what I was seeing day in and day out. From about 2016, it started hitting me that something is happening to the population I care
So,
for.
what are you saying exactly? That when a person sits in the heat, you get all this repercussion effects in your body? How, tell us a little bit about that.
Exactly.
It's interesting. I had to go to do no, I was going to perform a wedding on Saturday. And I really and truly sat down outside. I was not sitting in the sun directly. I sat on the patio, the veranda, as we'd say. But for some reason, that was about 2 hours before. When I got up, before I went and take a shower, I really started feeling dazed and dizzy and out of it. And I was wondering, what is wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? And I couldn't put my finger on it. But now you are mentioning this, and that is really, really amazing. I mean, it's live and direct. It happened, and I kept on thinking. What went on. I had a lecture on Sunday with a bunch of doctors. It was it was a graduates program with a bunch of families and doctors, 300 people. And my wife even went and asked the doctor, one of our friends, what is going wrong with him? This is what was happening. And now that you say this, it makes so much sense. So could you elaborate a little more about some of these
Well,
effects? Because
that's
people can be
that's
stressed out,
exactly
really, not knowing what's going on.
right. Now, that's what you're talking about is when we see the acute effects of the heat. And that's where it comes on you slowly because the dehydration. And also when it's so hot and humid, your sweating isn't quite the same. So you're not able to cool your body if there were a breeze or something happening. And our temperatures now feel like 100 because even though it's only 90, because of the humidity, it feels hotter and your body cannot adjust rapidly enough, especially if you're not aware and you're not taking in the fluids. If you have any kind of medication that can cause your electrolytes, your fluid balance to go off, it happens even more. So people who are on blood pressure medicine sometimes will see problems. People who wear a little bit more clothes so the body can't release the heat, you'll see it happening. Just recently, Carlos Santana, who's this world famous musician, just had a heat episode while he was performing in the middle of Detroit because it is so hot and your body cannot adjust rapidly, especially as you get older. And if you have a little bit more body fat, you're going to have the problem of feeling it. And one of the first signs is the dehydration. And then you start getting that brain fog and feeling a little tired, a little weak, a little bit disoriented a bit, then you will pass out. The musician Carlos Santana collapsed on stage. Luckily, you were sitting down and you were able to go in and get cool, so you didn't extend to that degree. So that's one of the impact we're going to see more and more because with climate change, there are more hot days, more days where it's going to feel like 90 and 100, more days where your air is just not moving like it should, so you're going to cool down. So as the years go on, more and more of this and more people are going to feel it. But my patients have been feeling this for years, and that's what pushed me to say, something has to be done. But first, I had to learn more about what was happening. And that's where I started learning about climate change, learning about the 1.5 degrees rise, learning about the sea level rising and the glaciers melting and the impact that it's having on people's health right now, especially poorer people, Black and brown people. And with that, we have to act because we have to save each other. We have to work together to make sure our lives are better. And it's not just poor people, other people are happening too, all over the world, but we can make a change together. And so that's what got me involved.
Oh, that is phenomenal. That is really, really, really interesting. So, Ludovica, could you tell us? I mean, well, I suppose more or less that would be the reason why you got involved also. But if you want to add to that as to what motivated you to getting involved in these kind of services, and then we're going to hear from both of you all again. Maybe when we come back in the next segment, because we got a couple of minutes, about 5 minutes again for this segment to come to an end. We want to know what are the solution and what are your recommendations and what do you guys do to help prevent the effects and the repercussions of this kind of heat problems that people face in the world. So tell us, what motivated you to get involved in this sort of service for humanity? And I say humanity because it is a humanity problem. While you may be doing it here in South Florida, it is a humanity problem because our viewers worldwide, whether they're in India, they're in the Philippines, wherever they are, and they're hearing and they're viewing this program, they can benefit from your advice.
Yes, absolutely. It is a global issue. And what really got me into this field was really my early career as a journalist. I had a experience where I was working on a documentary on international issues with PBS. And I realized when we had one of our documentaries on climate change that we were interviewing all experts on climate change. And I noticed the lack of diversity between the experts and the fact that really we weren't mentioning, we weren't highlighting the fact that Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities are on the front lines and are the ones who are suffering the most from this heat repercussion.
But why do you think that's the reason? Why is that the reason that the poor people face more consequences? What, because they don't have the facilities and the means to counteract the issue? What is the reason behind that?
So we can look at this on a global and local scale. Generally speaking, because of practices that are called redlining practices, and these are urban design practices that have been practiced in cities based on racial inequities and classes. And let me explain. When cities were designed, areas that were designated for Black, Indigenous, and people of color were actually, these communities were actually placed on purpose on areas of the cities that had less access to, for example, the coast, so the breeze of the coast, if we're talking about heat, and were placed in areas that were more congested, for example, by traffic. These areas, because of really racial-based discrimination, were taken away of heat mitigation, things such as tree canopies. You will see even today that the poorer communities are actually in areas that are less green, have less trees. And why is that important? If you are from a lower income community, usually, and this is what our data tells us, you rely more, for example, on public transportation. You don't have your own car. If you are in an area that is then, that has less trees, you will be exposed to more heat because you're waiting for transportation, let's say for the bus outside in a non-shaded area. And this connects to what Dr. Holder was saying. These people are more exposed to heat temperatures, because of these practices, because of the fact that these neighborhoods still today have less things that can help them mitigate the heat. And this goes also for the housing infrastructures. Let's just think about the fact that here in South Florida, especially during this time of the year, it usually goes from May to October, we are exposed to higher temperatures. People don't want to spend all of this money on their electricity, so they tend to not invest in AC units, in air conditioning, or keep them off for the majority of the time because of the expense. So you see how the fact that class, income, and race is related to more effects of heat and climate change in general.
Wow, that is interesting. Listen, that is really interesting. I think that a lot of people take this for granted and they don't really, understand, and they more or less, what I will say, they reciprocate based on symptoms or things that happen, but they don't have much knowledge about prevention to this sort of climate heat control situation. And this is really educational. Before we go on the short break, I must ask you all, maybe we need to come back and have another show on some other aspect that you guys think that we could educate the world more on this, so that people can be more educated and benefit. That's point number one. Number two, whatever blogs or videos or that you guys have and you want to send for us, please feel free to send it for us. We will share it on our social media and our network. We got thank God, a wide level of network, very diverse. It's not just Muslims, it's very international, multicultural, multi-faith, etc. All right. That is really, 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 really interesting. So when we come back after the short break, again, 15 minutes have gone in talking in the second segment. So you see how time goes. I know you were wondering, 45 minutes, what are we going to do? How are we going to get this off? It's just done. So when we get back, we want to talk a little bit of what you all really offer. What do you offer, your organization, your services, what you offer to prevent or to help and to assist people who are victims of, well, what now?